Hello everyone, Jonathan here from M Games, and in this video I'm going to be showcasing my FBX Export Tools add-on for Blender 2.93. It's very easy. You go to the GitHub page, you go to Releases, and then you search for the zip file. Then in Blender you go to Edit, Preferences, you go over to the Add-ons tab, and then you click Install, and then you'll find it here, and then you just enable it with the checkbox. So what does this add-on do that Blender doesn't do by default? It gives us quick access to a folder path. So if we click the select directory, and then we can go into Documents, I'm just going to create modular room, and I'm going to select it and select directory. And we now have our path to the folder. And you'll notice if we select an object, we get a new button, which is the export. So we'll quickly export anything we have selected, as long as it's a mesh and not a light or a camera or a curve. You'll notice that the button still allows us to export with the light selected, but that's just the way it is with the add-on. It won't export anything. So let's go down here and drop down the FBX export settings. These top options are default with Blender's FBX exporter. So if I select an object, go into FBX, show you side-by-side comparison. So by default, we're limited to selected objects. We're exporting only meshes. We're using all local as the apply scaling, -Z forward, Y up, and apply unit. We have use space transform. We don't have apply transforms yet. The smoothing is edge by default with my add-on, and we can apply the modifiers. We don't have armatures or animations yet, so that's basically what this add-on is doing currently. And we can go down to UV export settings. You have the ability to rename UV layers. You can choose the name that you would like it to appear as. You can add a light map layer, which just adds a second UV layer. And you can unwrap light map UV layer, which basically means it will select the second UV layer, and then it will smart UV project and pack those UV islands to 0.3. I'll show you what that does here in a moment. Now when I click export, you'll notice that all the meshes exported into the folder with the correct names. That's one thing Blender doesn't do by default, is automatically name based on the object you have selected. Now I'm going to open up the UV editor and show you what the UV section does. And I'm also going to go into the Data tab and expand the UV maps. So basically what I did was I took a cube and then I deleted some faces. So you'll notice this is what the default UV map looks like. So this is why we're going to see a bunch of small squares here and there. And what I'm going to do for the fun of it is I'm going to add a few UV layers here. I'll add in a plane, and I'm going to remove the UV layer to show you what happens without any UV maps. And again, this is the settings we're using. So with our plane selected, what would happen with these settings is it would create a UV map. So if there is no UV map at all in this object, it's going to add a UV, then it's going to rename that UV to UV channel and then 0. Now with the add light map UV layer checked and rename UV layers unchecked, with the plane selected, since we don't have any UV maps, it's going to add a UV map, and then it's going to add another UV map for the light map layer. Both of them are going to be renamed to UV channel 0 and 1 anyway, because there's no UV map. But with this one, with UV map already created and unwrapped, ready for any textures you might have, If you were to rename that, then this would be renamed to UV channel 0. And with the add lightmap UV layer, it would add another UV layer, and both of these would be named UV channel 0 and UV channel 1. But if you chose not to rename it, like you preferred this UV map to be named whatever it was, then add lightmap UV layer will only add and rename the second UV layer. And same goes for this, it would be UV channel _1, and this would be the same. And the only thing that would change is the second UV layer. Now the more destructive thing that happened here is the unwrap lightmap UV layer, which this will take whatever's in your second UV layer and it will unwrap it. So let's go through and show you what happens. We have the plane selected, we have no UV maps, and if I were to export, you'll notice that it creates a UV layer with UV channel _0 as its name. Now if I were to do that again, and this time only have add lightmap UV layer, we export, it will create a UV channel 0, and then it will create a UV channel 1. And I'm going to go through and rename the UV layers. So I'm going to set this to UV. And we don't need the add lightmap UV anymore since we already have a second channel. I'm going to export, and it creates a UV _0, UV _1. And if I were to do that again, and just give it something and do that, and then we'll bring it back, it doesn't really matter because the second layer is already created. Now here's where the fun happens. So you can see it changing. I am going to go over here. These are the UVs for the plane. You're probably not going to see much of a difference, but we're going to unwrap the second UV layer. Yeah, it's such a small difference. So I'm going to scale the UV1 and rotate it. I might as well say UV map. So we have two different layers, and just to show that things are changing, I'm going to move that off the map. So we're going to uncheck rename UVs, we're going to have unwrap lightmap UV layer, and we're going to export the plane. Now if I go into edit mode, you'll notice that instead of being up in the top right, it moved it down and unwrapped it, and we still have the UV map. To show you another example, just in case you had different other channels. So all of them are unwrapped basically the same. And what are we going to do? Well, we can add lightmap UV layer. We'll export. You'll notice that it jumps over to other, but it did not unwrap. Now if we hit the unwrap lightmap layer, click it now, you'll notice that it unwrapped the second layer. If we choose to rename, then you'll notice that every UV layer is named with this convention. And the fun thing is, it's exporting after it renames and packs the UVs. So we can select all these objects. We're going to rename all UV maps. So remember, we have UV map. We can add another 2 here. We have all these as well. And we have no UV maps on the plane. So I'm going to choose to reset, actually. So what the reset button does is it just resets all checkboxes back to default values that I feel are safe to use when exporting models. And we'll just go back to the UV. I'm going to rename everything to UV channel. Select all the different objects I want to export, and then export. So you'll notice that our UV map is renamed, and we have a light map UV channel. And you'll notice that the other UV layers were renamed. And we can now go to our folder and see that everything was exported and renamed properly. I'm going to open up another Blender scene, delete everything in it, and I'm going to import the FBX. And you'll notice that everything is in the world center. This is based on the origin when exporting. So if you had the object over here while the origin is right there, then this is the way it would have imported, because the origin point is what moves the object to the world center. So I'm just going to move these around here. And there we go. We have our assets imported. We have our UV maps. Also, the modifiers were applied. If I go back over here, I had a weighted normal modifier. So if you go into the Object Data tab, go down to Normals, I have Auto Smooth turned on, and that's what's affecting the weighted normal. And the modifiers were applied. So if I also go over here, and I'm going to close the UV map, it's not needed, and I'm going to give this one a bevel, just exaggerate it, and then we can export. Let's see here. Yeah, we have the apply modifiers turned on. I do have visual geometry to mesh, which I'm going to show you here in a moment. Let's see here, this was the hallway. Here, import FBX hallway. You can see that the modifiers were applied. I'm going to go over to the UV map. I'm going to tab in the edit mode, and you can see that's what the default UV map turned into. If you go over to the second one, you'll notice that it packed everything. Yeah, there shouldn't be any stretching there. And if we exported this without the apply modifiers, and you'll notice that there are no modifiers that were applied, and there's no models that are included with the object. But we did unwrap it. I'm going to go back to this really quickly. I'm going to remove the bevel, and what I'm going to do is I'm not going to include, or, well, yeah, I'm not going to include any of the UV maps. So we're going to go over here. Whoops. I want to get rid of those ones. UV map. This one will be test. Alright, so if I were to export now, we are not renaming the UVs, we're not adding a light map layer, and we're not unwrapping the light map UV layer. So if I click export now, then I go over here, let's move everything over to the right a bit. Let's import. Okay, so as you can see, we have our UV blah, our UV map, and all the UV channels and wall, and then we've got our test. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of how the export settings add-on works, and I hope it's useful to you. One other thing I wanted to showcase was if your file path doesn't exist, then you won't be able to export. Be warned, if you have your file path like this, it's not going to go into the modular room folder, it's going to go into test. So just be warned that you have this backslash at the end and it will go directly into modular room. And that's the end of the video. Thank you for watching. I hope this add-on is useful to you, and have a good day.